The surgery date was locked in for weeks, Tuesday, 8 o'clock, downtown hospital. It wasn't optional. My condition was worsening. The longer I waited, the more mobility I'd lose. Then, less than 24 hours before I was supposed to go under the knife, my phone rang. "This is the clinic coordinator," the voice said, too calm. "Your operation has been postponed." Postponed. That word doesn't feel like much until you've been counting the days by the weight of your own pain. I forced my voice steady. "Why? Your pre-op clearance hasn't been finalized." That was a lie. I had confirmed with my surgeon's office 2 weeks ago, my clearance had been submitted and approved. I asked her who requested the delay. She hesitated. "No one. It's just a scheduling issue." Another lie. The next morning, that a scheduling issue turned into a paperwork error. By afternoon, it was a lost file. 3 different explanations in less than 12 hours, that wasn't incompetence. That was coordination. I didn't have proof yet, but I didn't need it to know the truth. That night, proof found me. My cousin was on the phone in the kitchen, thinking I was upstairs in bed. I came down quietly for water and caught the words mid-sentence. "She's out of the way now. By the time she's back on her feet, the will's already settled. No contest." He laughed. The kind of laugh that tells you the cruelty isn't an accident. I stayed hidden until he left the room. My pulse was steady, but something colder had replaced the shock. They'd done it on purpose. Someone in my own family had interfered with my surgery to keep me from contesting my late father's will. If I was stuck in bed, or worse, doped on painkillers, I couldn't attend hearings. I couldn't sign documents. I couldn't stop them from pushing the inheritance through. They thought they were clever. What they'd actually done was commit a very specific kind of crime, tampering with medical records and delaying necessary treatment. That's not a family dispute. That's a legal grenade. I didn't storm into the kitchen to confront him. I didn't call anyone screaming. That's how you lose. I went to bed, stared at the ceiling, and let my mind start building the framework of a counterattack. By morning, I had the first step, documentation. I called the hospital, requested copies of every note, every lab result, and every update made to my file in the last 30 days. I didn't let them email it. I drove there. I wanted physical paper in my hands. When the receptionist slid the stack across the counter, I flipped through on the spot. Half my pre-op documentation had been altered 2 days ago, the exact day my surgery was cancelled. The handwriting was sloppy, and the signature. Not my surgeon's. That was my first piece of evidence. I walked out with the papers under my arm and a decision in my head. I wasn't just going to win my share of the inheritance. I was going to make whoever did this wish they'd never heard my name. But to do that, I needed to know exactly who had their hands in my file. My cousin was too stupid to orchestrate this alone. That meant someone else, someone higher up, was pulling the strings. And I already had a strong guess, my aunt. The self-proclaimed executor of the estate. The woman who had been angling for full control since the day after the funeral. She had access, contacts, and the arrogance to think she could get away with it. I didn't need to prove it to myself. I needed to prove it to a court. That meant finding her connection inside the clinic, the one who physically altered my records. Once I had them, I'd have the thread that unraveled the entire thing. 2 days later, I caught her making a call, and the voice on the other end. It belonged to someone at the clinic. The call came mid-afternoon. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was walking past the library when I heard her voice, low but sharp, carrying just enough for me to catch pieces. "Mark it as pending." "No, she won't know. Just make it look routine." I froze. That was my aunt's voice, the one I'd grown up hearing at every family gathering, now coded in the same tone she used on waiters she didn't tip. I took out my phone and recorded. Not the whole call, just enough. Her words, the pause, and the reply from the other end, a man's voice, older, maybe late 40s. Understood. I'll handle it. The connection was there. My aunt, and someone inside the clinic. The only question left was who. I didn't call her out. That would tip my hand. Instead, I went home and started digging. The clinic's website had a staff directory. Only one male in the records department fit the Voices profile, Timothy Hall, 10 years in admin. I needed confirmation. The next morning, I called the clinic from a prepaid phone. I introduced myself as Dr. Weston, from an out-of-town practice, and said I was following up on a patient file, my own, though they didn't know that. The woman who answered transferred me to Tim in records. The moment he said hello, I knew it was the same voice from my aunt's call. Now I had a name. That afternoon, I walked into the clinic under the pretense of delivering insurance documents. I handed an empty envelope to the front desk and said, "This needs to go directly to Tim." He came out, smiling politely, took the envelope, and thanked me. That 30-second interaction was enough. I had his face, his mannerisms, his voice in person. That night, I wrote him a letter. Not aggressive, not pleading. Just surgical. Tim. I noticed an unusual change in my pre-op clearance dated, exact date. The handwriting and signature don't match my surgeon's. Before I contact the state licensing board, I'd like your explanation. If this was an honest error, now is the time to clarify. My name. No threats. Just facts. Facts are scarier than threats because they're harder to argue with. I mailed it from a post office 2 towns over. No return address. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, I saw him in a cafe, not alone, but with my aunt. She slid an envelope across the table. He opened it, glanced inside, and nodded. I took the photo from across the street. Date, time, GPS tagged. Now I had a recorded call connecting them. The man's identity. Photographic evidence of an exchange that reeked of payment. Still, I wasn't ready to go in guns blazing. People like my aunt survive by reacting quickly and spinning stories. If I hit her head on, she'd deny, distract, and maybe even destroy the real evidence before I could get to it. I needed her to feel safe enough to keep talking. So I called her that evening. The hospital says they're still waiting for clearance, I said, letting my voice carry just enough frustration to sound believable. She made a sympathetic noise that didn't touch her words. These things happen, dear. Just rest. Don't stress about the will right now. Exactly what I wanted her to say. Because every time she told me not to stress about the will, she was confirming the will was her focus, not my health. Over the next week, I kept up the act, a mix of feigned confusion and gratitude, while I dug deeper. I pulled my phone records, compared call logs with the timestamps on the altered medical file, and saw it line up perfectly with her known movements. She thought she'd taken my voice out of the fight. What she didn't know was that I'd found a loose thread in her plan. And I was about to pull. The next morning, Tim called me himself, and the first words out of his mouth were, "I think I made a mistake helping her." Tim's voice on the phone was shaky, like a man who'd suddenly realized the floor under him wasn't as solid as he thought. "I think I made a mistake helping her," he said. I didn't rush him. I let the silence hang until he filled it. People like Tim can't handle quiet, they start talking to make it stop. "She told me you'd already agreed to postpone. Said it was just a paperwork thing. She even gave me the handwriting sample to make the change look right." There it was, intent, action, and collaboration. My aunt hadn't just asked him to do it. She'd equipped him to forge the documentation. "How much?" I asked. 500. He said it like he was testing the water, waiting to see if I'd react. I didn't. "Cash?" "Yes." We met the next afternoon in a small cafe far from the clinic. He looked like a man who'd been checking over his shoulder for days. I ordered coffee. He didn't touch his. "She told me to mark your clearance as pending and add a note about additional tests," he said quickly. "Then she told me to change the date on the surgeon's note so it wouldn't flag in the system." "That's all." "That's not all," I said, keeping my voice calm. "That's falsifying a medical document. That's tampering with a patient file. You know what the penalties are?" He stared down at his mug. "I looked it up last night." "Good. Fear is a useful motivator." I slid a folded paper across the table. It was a printout of the state's criminal code, with the penalties for medical record fraud highlighted. Up to 5 years in prison. $50,000 in fines. "Do you want to take that hit for her?" I asked. "No." His answer was immediate. "Then start talking." And he did. Names, dates, methods. Every email, every call. She'd contacted him through a burner phone and a private email account she'd set up under a fake name. He'd kept backups, just in case she decided not to pay him. That, just in case, was about to save him, and bury her. He emailed me the entire folder that night. The contents were better than I could have hoped. Screenshots of her messages telling him exactly what to change. A photo she'd sent of forged handwriting for him to copy. Confirmation that she'd moved the inheritance hearing to a date before my new surgery. The timeline was perfect. 1. She orders the file altered. 2. Surgery postponed. 3. Hearing moved up while I be incapacitated. No coincidence. No plausible deniability. Over the next 3 nights, I sorted and cross-referenced everything. I matched email timestamps with call records from the prepaid phone she'd used. I printed each piece and labeled it by order of occurrence. By the time I was done, the file was over an inch thick. This wasn't just a malpractice case anymore. This was fraud, obstruction, and conspiracy. I didn't call her. I didn't warn her. I wanted her living in the false comfort of thinking she'd won. Because the next move wouldn't come from me directly. It would come from someone she couldn't manipulate. The next call I made was to a lawyer whose reputation for medical negligence made hospitals settle before they even stepped into court. Diana Keller didn't waste words. I sat across from her in her office, the folder between us. She flipped through the documents in silence, her eyes moving the way a surgeon's scalpel does, precise, controlled, cutting straight to what mattered. When she closed it, she leaned back. "You have her. You have him. And you have a timeline that would make a judge salivate." "I'm not looking for slow justice," I said. "I want her pinned before she even sees it coming." Diana's mouth curved, just slightly. "Then we start with a notice of intent to litigate. Private. Certified mail. No public filing, yet." A notice of intent wasn't a lawsuit, but it was the legal equivalent of a loaded chamber. It spelled out the evidence, the damages, and the violations in plain language. It gave her 30 days to respond before we filed. To anyone who's guilty, that's not a letter. It's a countdown. We sent 2 copies, one to her house, one to her attorney. Both certified, both signed for. On the same day, Diana sent another letter, this one to the clinic's compliance department. It didn't name my aunt, but it detailed the falsification of my medical records, complete with photocopies and dates. It demanded an internal investigation into Tim's actions. The clinic had no choice but to open a review. And just like that, Tim was temporarily suspended pending investigation. That was her first real crack. She didn't know I'd put it there. 2 days later, Tim called me. "She's asking if I've talked to anyone." What do I say? Say no, I told him. And record it. He did. And in that recording, she told him to wipe the account and make sure nothing survives discovery. That was destruction of evidence, a gift to my case. Meanwhile, I made a move in probate court. Through Diana, we filed a motion to continue the inheritance hearing, citing unforeseen medical complications caused by a third party's interference with necessary surgery, and referencing pending legal action. We didn't name her. We didn't have to. The implication was enough. The judge granted it without hesitation, pushing the hearing 6 months out. That single filing erased the entire point of delaying my surgery. She tried to cut me out by timing the hearing before I could recover. Now I had more than enough time to heal, and plan. I could imagine her reading that notice, realizing her carefully timed advantage had evaporated, but not understanding how. That's the beauty of the first strike. It lands quietly. They only feel it when the ground shifts under them. On day 27 of the 30-day countdown, she broke the silence, and showed up at my door with a smile I didn't believe for a second. She didn't knock like a normal person. 3 quick taps, a pause, 2 more, the rhythm of someone who assumes you'll answer. When I opened the door, my aunt was standing there in a tailored coat, holding a tin of cookies like we were about to have a pleasant chat. Her smile was perfect, her eyes calculating. "I thought I'd stop by to see how you're holding up," she said, stepping forward without waiting for an invitation. I let her in. Not because I wanted her there, but because I wanted her to think she was walking into friendly territory. People talk more when they believe they're safe. She set the tin on the counter and gave me a once-over. "You look pale. Still no surgery date?" "Not yet," I said, letting my voice sound tired. "Such a shame. These delays, they can really wear you down." I knew exactly what she was doing, testing the waters, looking for signs of despair. If I showed weakness, she'd double down. If I showed strength, she'd retreat and prepare something worse. So I gave her something in between. "I'm just taking it one day at a time," I said. At least the inheritance hearing got moved back. That takes some pressure off. Her smile twitched. "Just barely." "Oh. I hadn't heard that." "Really? Court approved it last week." I kept my tone light, as if it were just a happy accident. She shifted in her chair. "Well. I'm sure that's for the best." It was a tiny crack, but I saw it. She hadn't planned for the hearing to move, and now she was recalculating. She reached for the cookies, opened the tin, and offered me one. "We're family, you know. No matter what happens, we should take care of each other." That was her pivot, the faux olive branch. In her language, it meant, stop whatever you're doing, and I won't push harder. I leaned back in my chair. Family takes care of each other by not interfering with medical treatment. For a second, the mask slipped. Her eyes hardened. "Careful, dear. That's a serious thing to suggest." "It's a serious thing to do," I replied. Silence. The kind that hums. She broke it by standing, smoothing her coat. "You've always been dramatic. Just focus on getting better." She left without another word. But I knew the visit wasn't about cookies or concern. She'd come to gauge whether I suspected her, and left with the answer she didn't want. By that evening, Tim called again. She'd contacted him within an hour of leaving my house, telling him to double-check that nothing could trace back to her. His words, not mine. And he had it recorded. That recording would be the nail I needed. Because when someone starts covering their tracks before the case even goes public, it tells every investigator exactly where to dig. She thought she'd just left my house with the upper hand. What she didn't realize was that she'd just walked straight into the part of the plan I'd been waiting for, the part where she panics. And panicked people? They make mistakes you can't buy. On day 27 of the countdown, she broke the silence, and showed up at my door with a smile I didn't believe for a second. By the time she left, I had her voice on tape ordering the destruction of evidence. And now, the countdown wasn't just running, it was accelerating. It started with a rumor. A distant cousin called me, just to check in, but I could hear the real reason in her tone. "Your aunt's been distracted lately," she said. "Snapping at people. Missing calls. Even cancelled a charity thing last minute." I thanked her, hung up, and smiled. It had begun. When you're used to controlling the story, the smallest disruption feels like chaos. The notice of intent had been sitting in her lawyer's office for 27 days. The clinic was investigating Tim. The hearing date had moved. She didn't know which threat to deal with first, so she was flailing at all of them. Tim, meanwhile, had turned into a fountain of information. Every conversation she had with him, he recorded. Every instruction she gave, he forwarded to me. One in particular stood out. "She told me to say the clearance delay was the surgeon's fault," Tim said over the phone. "Told me to make it sound like he was worried about your health." I didn't just save that recording, I sent a copy to my surgeon's office. They were furious. Within hours, they'd filed their own complaint with the clinic's compliance board, stating that their professional reputation had been attacked without basis. That meant the clinic's investigation into Tim was no longer internal politics, it was a legal requirement. 2 days later, I got word that Tim had been officially terminated. He was out of a job, but in exchange, Diana had drafted him an immunity agreement, full cooperation, no civil action against him. He signed it without hesitation. And with Tim out, my aunt lost her inside source completely. That's when the real unraveling began. She showed up late to a family brunch and spent most of it in the corner, furiously texting. She avoided looking at me, which only made everyone else curious. A cousin asked her if she was still dealing with that hospital thing, and her reaction was pure gold, sharp denial, too quick, too defensive. By the end of the week, the whispers had spread. She wasn't the unshakable figure she pretended to be anymore. She was human. Flawed. Vulnerable. That's when I made my next move. Through Diana, we sent her a second letter, this time with a copy of the recordings, the emails, and the timeline, marked Exhibits F. The cover note was short. Upon filing, these materials will become part of the public record. You have 3 days to propose resolution. We didn't say, settle. We didn't say, negotiate. We said, propose resolution, making it clear that she was the one now reacting to my terms. 3 days passed. No response. Instead, her lawyer called Diana, asking if all this could go away quietly. Diana's answer was perfect, quiet isn't on the table anymore. My aunt was officially on defense, burning energy trying to plug holes in a ship that was already sinking. Every move she made now only deepened the record against her. She wasn't worried about winning anymore. She was worried about surviving. And the best part? We hadn't even filed the case yet. She thought the pressure was unbearable now. She had no idea it was about to triple. On the morning of the 4th day after our letter, she made her biggest mistake yet, she called me directly. No lawyer, no buffer. Why are you doing this? She asked. Her voice wasn't confident this time. It was thin, sharp at the edges. Doing what? I asked, keeping my tone calm. You know what? Dragging this into places it doesn't need to go. We're family. Family doesn't try to keep each other from necessary surgery, I said. And they definitely don't forge documents to make it happen. Her breath caught. Silence. Then the line went dead. She'd hung up. And that told me everything, she had no comeback left. But I wasn't done. Because in less than a week, the countdown would hit 0, and when it did, she wouldn't just be losing the inheritance game. She'd be losing her freedom. By the time she realized it, I was already 3 moves ahead, setting up the next phase. When the clock hit 0, the case went public. The media picked it up by the afternoon. By dinner, the words, "tampering with medical records," were next to her name in online headlines. And by the next morning, she was exactly where I wanted her, on the front page, for all the wrong reasons. The morning the headlines hit, my phone lit up with messages. Friends. Distant relatives. Even people I hadn't spoken to in years. "Is this about your aunt? Just saw the news. Wow. She really did that?" I didn't answer most of them. Let the story spread on its own. The less I said, the louder the evidence spoke. By noon, the article had been shared across 3 local news sites. Each had a slightly different headline, but the words "tampering with medical records" appeared in all of them. They quoted sources close to the matter, Tim, of course, and cited pending litigation. Her name was there, printed in black and white. No rumors, no whispers. Facts. By mid-afternoon, the phone calls shifted tone. "Are you going to press charges? Do you think she'll go to jail?" I didn't answer those either. I wanted people wondering, guessing, filling in the blanks with their own imagination, because often, their version of the punishment is harsher than reality. That same day, Diana filed the official complaint with the state medical board, naming Tim and citing my aunt as the instigator. The clinic had no choice but to cooperate, which meant turning over every scrap of correspondence between Tim and the outside contact he'd saved under her fake email account. We already had those records. Now they'd be in official hands. 2 days later, my aunt's lawyer tried calling Diana again. This time, his tone had changed. Gone was the polite curiosity. Now it was urgency. "My client is prepared to discuss a settlement." Diana was ready for it. "Your client doesn't make offers. She accepts mine." That was the beauty of this stage, we weren't negotiating. We were dictating. At the same time, the probate court received an anonymous submission, which may or may not have come from someone with my handwriting, requesting a review of the executor's suitability given serious pending legal allegations. The clerk flagged it, and the judge scheduled a hearing to consider replacing her. That was a different kind of trap, one that didn't require me to win the malpractice case before hurting her. If the court decided she was unfit to serve as executor, she'd lose her control over the estate immediately. I didn't even have to be there for the first hearing. My lawyer handled it. The judge reviewed the public articles, the pending case, and the conflict of interest, and ordered her temporarily removed as executor, pending resolution of all legal matters. She lost her power in a single afternoon. From that moment, she couldn't move estate assets, couldn't authorize payments, couldn't even access certain accounts without court approval. She called me that night, her voice trembling with forced civility. "You didn't have to take it this far," she said. "You're right," I told her. "I could have taken it further." Silence. Then the click of her hanging up again. But the truth was, I was about to take it further. Because the real closing in wasn't about the court removing her. It was about ensuring that every path she might take, legal, financial, reputational, was blocked. So we filed a parallel civil suit for damages, pain, suffering, lost income from the surgery delay. It wasn't just about money, it was about forcing her to fight on 2 fronts. Every hour her lawyer spent on the civil suit was an hour not spent on her criminal defense. By the end of the week, her legal fees were already stacking into 5 figures. And the court hadn't even set a trial date yet. She was boxed in. No authority in the estate. Public image in flames. 2 lawsuits breathing down her neck. And no allies left inside the clinic to cover for her. The woman who had built her entire identity on control had just lost all of it. And I wasn't done tightening the ropes. Because next, I was going to make her ask me for help, and then decide exactly what that help was going to cost her. By the time she realized it, she'd already walked too far into the trap to turn around. There were no exits left. She didn't text first. She never would. Texts can be screenshotted. She called from an unknown number at 6:12 a.m., a time chosen to suggest urgency without sounding like panic. Her voice betrayed her anyway. "Can we meet?" she asked. "Busy," I said. "Court filings." A beat of silence. "Please." I let the word hang between us long enough to taste what it cost her. Then I gave her a place, a glass-walled cafe across from the courthouse where reflections turned everyone into witnesses. She arrived 10 minutes early, sat facing the door, hands folded on a leather portfolio that matched her shoes, a costume of competence worn by a woman who could no longer command a room. I watched from outside for a minute, letting the winter light carve new lines into her face. Control leaves marks on people when it goes. I sat. She didn't look at the menu. "You've made your point," she said. "I've made several," I replied. "Which one do you mean?" Her mouth tightened. "The papers. The stories. The hearing. All of it." A pause. "You win." She said it with the confidence of someone who believed, "You win," was the same as, "and now we return to normal." She still thought surrender bought absolution. "What do you want?" she asked. "Truth," I said. Out loud. A small laugh snapped out of her. "You think a confession fixes this? Grow up. I can make this disappear if you stop now." There it was, the last shard of the old crown. I tilted my head. "You're not in a position to make anything disappear. But you can choose which light you stand in when people look." She opened the leather portfolio and slid a document across the table. A family settlement, drafted overnight. It offered me my full share of the estate plus consideration for medical delays, money, in other words, if I withdrew the complaints and signed a non-disparagement clause broad enough to choke on. I skimmed the numbers. They were high. Deliberately high. She was buying oxygen. "You forged my medical notes," I said, voice even. "You moved a hearing to trap me on pain meds. You paid an employee to falsify documentation, then told him to delete evidence. This isn't a bad look. It's a crime." Her eyes flicked to the glass wall, to our reflections, to the people behind me reading newspapers with her name in them. "Lower your voice," she hissed. I didn't. "No." She leaned closer, words like a whisper through teeth. "You will drown in this too. Public fights don't make you noble. You'll be the one who dragged family business into the street." "You dragged my body into it," I said. "I'm just moving it back to the front door." Silence. Then the faintest tremor in her hand as she closed the portfolio. "What will it take?" Now we were speaking plainly. "Start with Tim," I said. "A written statement acknowledging you instructed him. Name the email, the burner, the cache. No excuses. Then a second statement to the clinic and the medical board confirming your role. After that, we discussed the estate." She stared at me as if the glass might crack around us. "You're asking me to destroy myself." "I'm giving you a choice," I said. "Confess and limit the damage. Or keep pretending and let the court do it for you, without the limits." Her jaw clenched. "You won't get jail time for me." "I don't need jail," I said quietly. "I need consequences. You'll feel them every day you wake up and can't make a call to fix anything." Her confidence faltered for the first time. Then she tried a different door. "It wasn't personal," she said. "It was timing. You would have fought the will." She stopped, searching for a word that didn't condemn her. "I optimized." "You weaponized pain," I said. "And you did it for control, not fairness." She looked down at the table. I could see the calculation turning inward now, away from me, toward the math of survival. Not how to win, just how to lose slowly. "What about the family?" she asked finally. "Your cousins. The gossip. The calls. You've set this house on fire. No, I said. I pulled the curtains back while you were already lighting matches. She inhaled, long, defeated. If I sign a statement, you'll, what? Pause the press. I don't control reporters, I said. I control filings. I can ask Diana to hold the next motion for 72 hours if I receive signed, notarized statements by end of day. After that, full speed. And the estate? We'll draft a consent order, you step down permanently as executor, stipulate to a neutral fiduciary, and reverse any transfers you authorized after the surgery delay. You'll also fund a medical trust in my name equal to the consideration you tried to buy me with, managed by the court for future care. Non-disparagement runs one way, you. I'll speak as needed. Her expression soured. That's blood. It's antiseptic, I said. Clean. Precise. It keeps the infection from spreading. She pressed her fingertips to her forehead like she could hold the world in place with her hand. I can't sign that today. You have 9 hours, I said. At 5 o'clock, the hold lifts. The next motion names you in all caps. She looked up, and for the first time since this started, the person across from me wasn't the aunt who taught me to fold napkins and smile for photographs. She was a defendant trying to remember which side of a door the handle was on. Do you hate me? She asked, almost curious. I don't waste hate, I said. I document. We stood. She gathered her portfolio with the stiff care of someone carrying a fractured wrist. As she reached the door, she turned back. If I do this, she said, I expect you to keep your end. I always keep mine, I said. That's the difference between us. She left without looking back. I watched her cross the street, pause on the curb, and fumble her phone like it had gained weight. Calls to lawyers, no doubt. Calls to people who used to jump when she spoke. I paid the bill, stepped outside, and let the courthouse clock mark the day into quarters. At 10 o'clock, nothing. At noon, a text from Diana, her counsel requested draft language. At 2, a PDF, the first and signed statement, redlined within an inch of its life. It danced around verbs like they were hot coals. Send yours, I told Diana. Sharp edges. No adverbs. At 3, the clinic compliance officer emailed Diana and me, we understand a statement may be forthcoming. Please advise. The kind of note that reads polite but stands like a loaded gate. At 4:30, traffic thickened on the avenue, and my screen lit with a single line from Diana, courier en route. Original signature. When the envelope arrived, I opened it at my kitchen counter, under the same light where I once sorted pill bottles I didn't want. The statement was short, factual, and absolute. She named Tim. She named the burner. She named the instruction to mark my clearance, pending, and to alter a date. She acknowledged moving the probate hearing. She admitted telling Tim to delete records. There was no apology. I hadn't asked for one. I forwarded the document to the clinic, the board, and the court with a single sentence, further materials to follow. Then I set the hold for 72 hours and wrote the consent order terms for the estate. My phone buzzed. Unknown number again. I answered. Her voice was quieter now, like a hallway after doors have shut. I did what you asked, she said. You did what the evidence required, I corrected. A breath. Is there anything else? Yes, I said. Tomorrow, you will stand in front of the family and read the same statement aloud. No embellishments. No spin. Just the facts. You want humiliation. I want transparency, I said. Humiliation is a side effect you earned. Silence lengthened until I could hear the hinge creak in it. Finally, fine. We scheduled the meeting for the next evening at my late father's house, neutral, familiar, unavoidable. I emailed the statement to every relative who counted, with the subject line, clarity. Then I closed my laptop and slept for the first time in weeks without waking to check the lock. The next day, people arrived in polite pairs, cheeks full of practiced sympathy. She came last, alone, portfolio in hand like a shield that wouldn't stop arrows. I pointed her to the standing spot by the mantel, my father's photograph above her shoulder, calm and unsmiling. She read. The words didn't crack her voice, they hollowed it. When she finished, no one applauded. No one shouted. They just looked at her with the comprehension that only facts can grant. A cousin asked, why? She didn't answer. There were no words left that could shrink the gravity. I dismissed the room and asked her to stay. She did, because she finally understood that the exit she wanted didn't exist on this floor plan. Tomorrow, I said, we finalize the consent order. The neutral executor takes over. Your access ends. After that, we talk about the medical trust. And if I refuse, she asked. Look at the mantle, I said. Then imagine your name under a different photograph, in a different building, with a case number beneath it. I won't lift the hold next time. I'll file. She blinked slowly, like a person adapting to dim light. You really will. I already did, in a way, I said. I just gave you a staircase instead of a drop. She nodded once, sharply. A surrender, not of guilt, of control. When she left, I stood in the doorway and watched the evening pull long shadows across the lawn. My phone buzzed with a final message from Diana, judge is prepared to sign if terms arrive by noon. They would. Because by then, the only leverage she had left would be the one I allowed her to keep for appearance's sake. I closed the door and, for the first time, rehearsed the final conversation in my head, not to savor it, but to calibrate it. Revenge isn't the point. Precision is. And tomorrow, I would deliver the exact dose required. She thinks she's walking into a negotiation, she's walking into sentencing, mine. The courthouse air always smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant, like it was trying to erase whatever passed through it. I arrived early, not because I needed to, but because I wanted her to walk in and see me already there, settled, unshaken. She came with her lawyer, the same one who tried to bluff Diana into backing down weeks ago. He avoided my eyes. She didn't. That was her pride, still trying to survive in scraps. We sat at opposite tables in a small, wood-paneled conference room. The judge wasn't presiding today, this was just the final review of the consent order. But the presence of a court clerk and two witnesses made the air feel heavier than any hearing. Diana slid the document forward. Here are the agreed terms. Review them one last time before signing. My aunt's eyes scanned the pages, her lawyer murmuring beside her. Every so often, her gaze flicked up at me, gauging whether I'd flinch if she pushed back. I didn't blink. The order was clean, tight, and absolute. Immediate resignation as executor of the estate. Permanent ban from serving in any fiduciary capacity for the family. Reversal of all transfers made after my surgery delay. Court-appointed neutral executor to replace her. Establishment of a medical trust in my name, funded from her personal assets, not the estate. Public filing of her signed statement with the probate court and medical board. When she reached the clause about the medical trust, her mouth tightened. This makes me look like I'm admitting guilt, she said. You already did, I replied. This just funds the damage you caused. Her lawyer cleared his throat. We've discussed this. It's the cleanest way forward. She signed. Each stroke of the pen was deliberate, like she thought slowing down would change the outcome. When the last page was done, she set the pen down and pushed the folder away like it might burn her. The clerk collected the papers, stamped them, and left with the witnesses. The door shut. It was just us and our lawyers now. Diana leaned back. That concludes the civil portion. The criminal investigation will proceed independently. We've agreed to no further contact outside counsel. Her lawyer nodded. My aunt didn't. Her eyes stayed on me. You got what you wanted. No, I said. I got what was necessary. She tilted her head. So what's left? Humiliation. You've already made me a headline. You made yourself the headline, I said. I just sent it to print. Her jaw shifted, a little tick she'd never been able to hide when she was holding back anger. You think they'll remember this in 10 years? They'll remember you lost everything you tried to take, I said. And they'll remember why. For a moment, she looked like she might speak again, but Diana stood, ending the meeting with professional finality. We walked out first. In the hallway, a reporter waited, not for her, for me. Any comment on the settlement? He asked. Yes, I said, loud enough for her to hear as she stepped into the corridor behind me. It's exactly what happens when you put yourself above both family and the law. Actions have consequences. I didn't look back, but I could feel the silence follow me down the marble steps. Outside, the winter air was sharp, clean. Diana handed me a copy of the signed order. This is done, she said. But the board will still want her statement on record tomorrow. That'll be public. You'll want to be ready for the noise. I'm ready, I said. Because the truth was, I'd been ready since the night I heard my cousin say I was out of the way. That was the moment I understood something she never would: revenge doesn't work if it's messy. It works when it's exact. She was now living inside the shape I'd built for her, a space with no doors, no windows, and only one view, the wreckage of her own making. And the best part? I still had the last move to make, one she didn't even know existed yet. Tomorrow, I'd make it. And when I did, she'd understand that I never wanted her apology. I wanted her freedom in my hands, just long enough to decide how much of it she'd get back. The board hearing wasn't held in a courtroom. It was in a sterile conference center, walls lined with file boxes, the kind of place where decisions are made in quiet voices that end careers. I arrived early again. Not to be polite, but to choose the seat directly across from hers. The long table between us wasn't just furniture, it was the distance she'd have to cross in words she couldn't take back. The compliance officer began. Ms. Ant's name, you've provided a signed statement regarding your involvement in the alteration of your niece's medical records. Today's purpose is to confirm that statement under oath and determine appropriate sanctions. Her lawyer whispered something. She nodded once and began reading from the page. No embellishments. No pauses. Just the facts. She instructed Tim to mark my clearance as pending, supplied forged handwriting, altered the timeline, and moved the probate hearing to preempt my recovery. Hearing it out loud was different. The words stripped her of the last protective layer of deniability. Every sentence sounded like a key turning in a lock. When she finished, the officer asked if she had anything to add. She shook her head. They thanked her, noted the statement for the record, and excused her from the room. She left without looking at me. That, more than anything, told me the power shift was complete. She had no reason to meet my eyes, there was nothing left for her to negotiate. The officer turned to me next. Do you wish to make a victim impact statement? I didn't stand. I didn't raise my voice. Yes. Her actions delayed medically necessary treatment. That delay caused pain, risked permanent damage, and was intended to remove my legal right to participate in the disposition of my father's estate. This was not a mistake. It was calculated harm. I stopped there. The rest was already in the file. The hearing adjourned with the board recommending full cooperation with the state's criminal division and permanent censure in any matter involving healthcare records. It wasn't jail. But it was the kind of mark that follows you forever. Outside, the sky was flat gray. My phone buzzed. Diana. The estate consent order has been filed. Funds for the trust will clear by end of week. I thanked her, but I didn't linger. I had one last place to be. That evening, I drove to my father's house. The new court-appointed executor had given me access to his study, my father's sanctuary. I sat in his chair, looking at the shelves lined with the law books he'd once used to help neighbors with their disputes for free. He'd believed in fairness. In accountability. Today, I'd delivered both. I didn't feel triumph. Triumph burns fast. I felt something quieter, sharper. Completion. By the time I left, the house was still, the way it had been after the funeral. Only now, there was no one waiting to twist that stillness into an advantage. The headlines would fade in weeks. The gossip would stretch for months. But the record, her record, would remain. Every job application. Every background check. Every conversation where someone said, "Wait, isn't that the woman who?" That was her real sentence, not prison walls, but the invisible kind, built from her own choices, walls she'd wake up inside for the rest of her life. I locked the study door behind me and stepped out into the cold night. The trust was funded. The estate was safe. And she was exactly where she put herself, out of power, out of allies, and permanently out of my way. They hid my medical records. I hid their freedom. And I never had to raise my voice to do it.